Covino and Rich. 866-969-1969, the most interactive show on radio. Judd Apatow's like, who are these bozos? Well, I'm Covino. That is Rich.
What's up, man?
Let's welcome for the first time, Judd Apatow. There he is, man.
Good to be here.
I wanted to interrupt you in the lobby, but you're on your phone. I didn't want to be rude and say, hey, welcome to the studio. And we were sitting there peacefully. So
I was just watching the Red Sox celebrate.
Oh, yeah.
I went last night.
I know, man. How was that? They showed you on TV, I think, right? Didn't
Here's
they?
the funniest
Yeah.
thing. Every time you go to the game,
Yeah.
there's one moment where they just like cut to people in the crowd that people might recognize.
Yeah.
The thing I always notice is the lack of applause when they show me. There's no excitement in the place at all, and so my wife and I, we always laugh about how you get so self-conscious because the camera's like 2 feet from you, and you're like, well, what do we do? Pretend to talk to each other? Do we wave?
You throw up a fist like you're at a boxing match.
No, but that's always awkward
you're a
too, because,
boxer.
as you know, 2 or 3 seconds is way longer than you think.
The other day, they held on us like 15 seconds, and we're up on the screen, and I just looked at the camera and I went, too long. Too long.
Wait, honestly, a good way to think about it. This would take 1 second, like, hey, like a little, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Cut to the next person. No,
it kept
Honed
it
in.
stayed in for so long. And so last night, like in the 7th inning, when the Dodgers, it was like 4-1, but they still had a shot.
Yeah.
They cut away to my wife and I. My wife has a look on her face of just devastation, and I'm looking at my phone. And I got instantly a zillion texts like, you douchebag, you Hollywood dick. Because I'm always mad when I see people behind home plate. They're all on their phones the whole game.
Yeah. And that was you. You were the
And
dude.
last night I looked down and they busted me because it's in between innings.
Of course, that's
so
the
you
time
look
to
down.
check, yeah.
I'm checking on my children.
Of
course.
which is a great thing you should be doing. And you know what, man? It's funny. I'm glad you said that because I always wonder, like, can you even relax knowing that they're going to have the camera up your nose and someone's going to call you out for doing something like that? Can you really enjoy it when
No.
they're... Yeah.
And if you watch like the Academy Awards or something, you have to realize that every time you see a cutaway of someone, the camera is like a foot from their face. So they're so self-conscious. So like I was at the Academy Awards this year because we had The Big Sick was nominated. And
fantastic, by the way.
Yes.
thank you, sir. Thank you. And so the camera's like right next to my face, and your fear is they're gonna catch you. Like if you're not paying attention and they cut to you and you're like, that fucking asshole.
Well, that happens. I think like this past year, some girl was on her phone when they were doing like a tribute to the in memoriam was about to play and someone was tweeting. Like they'll always catch someone.
No, you have to have like kind of a half smile the entire show. So no matter what happens, you look positive.
It's so weird. You know, I feel like you get a perspective that no one else really gets. We were talking about it before. For example, I'm sure you've thrown out a first pitch at a Dodgers game. No?
If you watch my Netflix special,
yeah.
I tell the story.
That's right.
It's one of the disasters of my life.
That's right. Of course. He has a whole story about it and your big return to Netflix, which was great. There's a feeling that people get that when they throw a pitch or when they throw one back into the stands that someone's going to scout them like, oh, who is that guy? Right? Who has that rocket of an arm?
That's not what I thought. What I thought is, can I not try to throw it straight and have it go like completely to the left?
Yeah, I know.
All I wanted was to go straight, but I didn't get all the way to the plate. They said to me, like, it's weird when you're on a mound, you'll throw it into the dirt. So you have to like aim higher than you think you should. Right. And I did not.
Yeah.
And it hit the damn dirt and rolled.
How
in.
embarrassing.
Yeah, you got to just make sure it's not terrible because the terrible ones live on, whether it's a Baba Booey or a 50 Cent or someone that they will just never go away.
Yeah.
Mine wasn't bad enough to become legendary.
Right.
It was just kind of...
It hurt your feelings. Yeah.
By the way,
you
I
left
know
feeling like a failure a little bit.
I know where you're going with this analogy.
Yeah.
Because when you go to a ball game, let's say you have the chance to throw out a first pitch or do something like that, everyone has this weird feeling of, oh, maybe someone will notice me. A guy like
This
you,
is my moment.
Yeah, I imagine
I'm old.
every comic or actor or actress that bumps into you. Do you get the sense that they're hoping like maybe he sees something in me? Is like a weird vibe that people throw out around you?
I know that happens sometimes. I try not to tune into it because then I'll feel like no one likes me for who I am.
Right? No, that's what I mean. Like, how
But
do
every
you know?
once in a while it happens.
Right.
And sometimes it happens with like a very established person, someone that like you're terrified of.
Yeah.
And you realize, but they're looking for a gig because there's not that many good gigs out there.
Yeah.
There's not that many good movies.
So that's what I mean. Like, if you're looking through the eyes of Judd Apatow, there's some people who are like, "Hey, man, nice to meet you," but then there's a lot of people.
I'm gonna be funny. Here's my moment.
Yeah, they're putting on
Here's
somewhat
my
of an
chance.
audition a little bit, which has to be weird for you because you have to figure out what's real and what isn't.
And they don't realize that the only people I'm interested in are the ones who've given up all hope.
Those are the ones.
Now,
Those are the ones.
I'm looking at all the stuff that you've
Oh, my
done,
God.
Judd, and
It's endless.
You know what's crazy is that lately, the things you've been doing that have been fantastic are all over the place. Like Doc and Daryl, I totally
yes,
forgot
yes,
how much I
yeah.
love that.
That
And
was fantastic.
That's not a typical Judd Apatow project.
Well, I'm from New York, from Long Island, and so when Doc and Daryl started playing for the Mets, that's when I was in like 11th grade.
Yeah, it's your
And so
primo time.
I went to an enormous amount of those games. And so we started working on this documentary, me and my partner, Michael Bonfiglio, who's a great documentarian. And it was intense because it was about, guys who were ill-prepared to be mega superstars in New York. And they had, major addiction problems. And
Oh, it's fantastic. You know what I learned from that one? I think that's when I found out that Dwight Gooden never made it to the parade. Isn't that where we learned that, or no?
And regretted it the rest of his life.
Yeah, I don't think I ever knew that little fun
I read
fact.
that in the the Bad Guys One.
Yeah.
Well, Rich is a diehard
I'm a
Mets
huge
guy.
Mets fan from
Yeah.
Long Island. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that to me that was fantastic. Doc and Daryl, The Big Sick, which. We read those commercials for a good month or so. I remember because you couldn't say his name. Remember?
Yeah.
Nangiani. I was like, he's not Italian.
Who's this Italian guy? Nangiani.
Mike Covino. He's not Italian.
Nangiani.
And close to your heart, Covino, grew up a huge Pee Wee Herman fan.
Oh
Yes,
man,
yes, we did.
Was that cool to work with Paul Rubens?
Oh my gosh, we made a movie for Netflix, Pee-wee's Big Holiday, and
with Joe Manganiello.
I mean, to spend years talking to Paul Rubens about Pee-wee Herman, there's nothing more fun. But what's interesting is when we would talk about it, and when he was writing it with Paul Rust, the star and creator of Love with his wife Leslie Arfin.
Yep.
He would never do the voice. He never did the voice. So we would talk about it. And lame. Well, Pee-wee can do this, so he can do that. But he never would do it.
Right. He would never be Pee-wee.
And then one day, we go to the set, first day, and he's in the suit, and he's doing it all day. And I was like, this is heaven.
That's awesome.
I bet.
loved it.
You know what it's sort of like? I mean, not to try to name drop, but anytime we're with Henry Winkler,
Oh, yes.
he'll once in a while he'll throw like, "Hey, let me tell you," and then he stops.
He'll get into character.
He'll say, "Let me tell you something, Cunningham," and then he goes back to Henry Winkler.
Hey, Richie. He'll do an "Hey, Richie." You're like, oh, there it was.
Keep going.
So anyway, Rich is a big diehard Mets fan. I'm a diehard Pee Wee Herman fan.
Yes.
Just so you know a little
So the
bit
last
about
couple of years, you've really made us happy.
Yeah. And I was so happy that people loved that movie.
I loved it.
Because your fear is you're going to make a bad one, and people really love that movie. If you haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. And
Well, you know what?
it's really good.
I watched, Pee Wee's Big Adventure was a classic, one of my favorites growing up. Then Big Top Pee Wee. I never even watched the whole thing, and I was way into Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
So that when that one came out and I loved it, I was like, oh, I showed it to my kid. You could watch it with your parents, and
Yes,
no one's
yes.
offended. It was fantastic. But you know what? You bring up Paul Rubens. We're talking about all the different movies that you've done, and Rich and I had a theory like, how do you get so intertwined? I know you've been doing this so long, but I feel like you got a knack of intertwining and mingling with all the right people, or do you just make them all the right people? Like, how does this work in your mind? Because Rich and I have been working in radio, right, and entertainment for over 20 years.
Yeah.
We don't know anybody cool.
Like you hear stories like, oh, you were roommates with Sandler, and then you hang out with Paul Rudd, and you're buddy. All of a sudden, you and Seth Rogen. Like, is it just coincidence?
I think that I come to it as a fan. So I'm, both in hiring or just generally, I appreciate people who are really funny and talented. I would, I guess I have good taste in people who are funny.
And an eye for it.
And so then it just starts adding up. But then I literally would meet people. So if I meet, Seth Rogen, and he's a kid, he's 16 years old. And I had the same thing with Kenan Thompson, was in Heavyweights, this Disney movie we did a long time ago, when he was 16. And I just thought, if these guys were in movies, I'd watch them.
Right.
And it's as simple as that. I wish there was a movie starring Jason Segel. Oh, no one's going to make it? I guess I'll make it.
You're making
and then,
it. Wow.
And luckily, these people are so talented and have, great stories and ideas that they come through. But I do look at it like, I'm just a fan. I just want to make the things I wish existed.
But you're so connected and intertwined with so many cool people. And Rich mentioned the Adam Sandler story, how you guys were roommates at one point, which, looking back, that's amazing. That's just a crazy thing because both of you guys are so successful in what you do. So my question is, I know you guys are friends and you co-write and you probably root each other on, but is there a competition because you sort of started in the same place? Like a friendly, even subconscious competition?
Well, I think I used to be annoyed that women did not like me and liked him. So when we were young, I would always say to him, I'm pretty sure I'm better looking than you. So there was that, just me.
That way.
Yeah, I would just be like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Because he had so much charisma.
Right.
So even when no one knew who he was, if we went somewhere, very quickly the room would gravitate
so what
to
you're
him.
saying, Sandler's a cock block is what you're saying.
Well, it was more like I couldn't get anyone to be interested in me.
Right.
And men, women, he just had the charisma of a star.
Right.
That is why he's a star. And I did not.
Right.
I just did not. And so that was the thing where I was competitive. Like, why do people like you so much?
But it's the likability factor. Did you watch his recent Netflix thing yet?
It was unbelievable. Although I performed on one of the tapings the song Station 69, which Rob Schneider did.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it right now, I was better than Schneider.
No way!
So
I didn't need to fly in on a wire.
Oh, you did the same exact thing?
Yeah, because we've sung that song a lot together. Because how Adam started doing stand-up again is I started doing it again after 2 decades. And I told him, I said, it's so much fun. You have to perform live again. And I convinced him to show up at Largo in L.A., and he had a good time, and I'm like, it's so fun, right? And then he got addicted to doing it again. And I was at a bunch of the tapings, and the Sandler special,
it's great.
is amazing.
I thought it was fantastic.
It really was.
By the way, there's got to be something so addictive or special about it because there's no need for Judd Apatow to just go jump on stage.
We love comedy so much, and so
do you
there's
feel
nothing
pressure?
better.
I mean, because I'm sure there's pressure when a movie comes out.
I feel like an inner pressure to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy doing it, but if I feel like I'm not as strong as I want to be, I feel like I gotta focus and write jokes, and that's fun though. It's fun to like want to be as great as all these people you're seeing. If you go to the Comedy Store or the Improv on any night, it's Maria Bamford and Bill Burr and Joe Rogan and everyone is murdering. So it's fun to go, I'm a successful person, but can I do what they're doing? And so, I'm about to go on the road. I'm going to Milwaukee on election night at Turner Hall. I'm going to be in Minneapolis the night after that at the Pantages Theater. And you can get tickets at juddapatow.com/tour. And I'll be there with Ian Edwards, who's an amazing comedian, and Wayne Fetterman. So there's nothing more fun than being around people and not just alone in a room with an editor.
I'm looking at some information on you, Judd. When they break it down, director, producer, writer, actor. And I think the average person's like, all right, well, what does that all mean, right?
Yeah.
There's certain movies where, he was the director but not the writer, and then he's the producer but not the director.
He's involved.
You're involved. Is there something that the average person doesn't know? Like, listen, directing's the biggest pain in the ass, and I prefer to just write. And break that down for a second? Because producer, writer, director. I think the average person is a little confused.
Well, sometimes when you're a producer, you feel like I can help make this great, but I don't think I'm the person to direct it. So this amazing director, John Lee, directed the Pee Wee Herman movie for Netflix. And I just thought, I don't think I'm the kind of person that knows how to do that, this type of imaginative filmmaking. I do a little more of a realistic style. And so I'll, take myself out of it while supporting it as a producer and getting them their budget and being tough on the script and the edit. And so with each project, I try to figure out, how can I help? So sometimes I do a lot. Sometimes I do very little.
It's interesting on that list you just read. You didn't say comedian. There is nothing as a comedian, and I know how much you love comedy.
Yeah.
Is there a part of you that feels like, fuck, well, deep down, I'm really a comedian.
For each project
Right,
he's been
I know.
in, it'll be like Cable Guy.
Right.
Director, no, but he produced and wrote it, you know?
Well, I think, stand-up was always my first love. I got into it because I was a kid watching stand-ups on The Tonight Show and The Mike Douglas Show, and I'd watch Seinfeld and Leno when I was a kid, and I just thought that would be the most fun thing ever to do.
Well, let me see if I got this right. Remember when you were a kid, Rich, and you would watch the Mets or whatever?
Yeah.
You'd find their address somehow, and you'd like reach out to the players, write them a letter, and if you got someone to respond back, that was like the biggest deal ever. I think I did that once, and I think it worked. I think I like Bobby Meacham of the Yankees. Remember? I think he replied back to me. I was so excited about it. Isn't that the approach you took with comedy? Like, didn't you just start?
I did it with the Mets too.
You did?
My grandfather.
Hubie Brooks sent them an autograph.
My grandfather had some meeting with the Mets, and he got me an autograph ball or something. And so one day, me and my friend said, let's go see if we could find that guy. And we knocked on the door of the Mets offices when we went to the game, and he did talk to us.
No shit.
And then I used that contact to get an interview with Mookie Wilson.
No way.
And so when I was in 8th grade,
Yeah.
I interviewed Mookie Wilson for my junior high school newspaper. And I was always of that mind to try to figure out if you could get to people.
Right.
And that's why when I was in high school, I started a radio show where I interviewed comedians. And I interviewed Steve Allen, and then I interviewed Howard Stern and John Candy and people like that. And it was my way of asking people, how do you do it?
Right.
And I interviewed Harold Ramis. How do you do it? And he talked about writing jokes for other comedians when he was first starting out. Like he wrote jokes for Rodney Dangerfield. So when I first started out, I wrote jokes for like Jeff Dunham and Peanut. Like I wrote jokes for
You didn't write jalapeno on a stick, did you?
I wrote for the old man puppet.
Oh, no way.
That's cool.
But I did. I learned things from doing these interviews when I was 15, 16 years old, and that's how I got in the business.
Now, but hold on, Rich.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, since people were so kind to you, a high school guy reaching out, and they were, do you do that? If do you take the time?
I tried to.
He's like, I'm here right now. You bozo. No, but I like to like a high school kid. If they reach out, like, do you now feel like you owe it to some younger guys?
I do, but here's the difference: is that when I was a kid, so this is around '84. There was no satellite radio. There was no podcasting. There was no internet. So no one wanted to talk to comedians. When I used to call a comedian, no one had ever asked them to do an interview. So if I asked Seinfeld to do an interview, other than maybe some radio to promote a show, no one was interested in anything about them. So they were pretty open to talking. Now, everyone in the world has a podcast.
Yeah.
So they're just fighting off interview requests. I think it was easier back in the day.
Without a doubt. I'm looking at some of the movies you've done, and it's not some, it's a million of them. So is it hard for you to really look at the landscape of comedy over the last 10 or 20 years when most of these are your movies? Like we look at things a certain way, like, when we were kids, the John Hughes movies. Then you get into the Farrelly brothers, or Sandler and his crew, Happy Madison.
Yeah.
You're like a chapter of people's lives that's still going on. Is it hard for you to actually acknowledge that?
I think you're always terrified that it's over, and that's what keeps you going.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter how many you've had that have been good, it's not going to help you make the next one good. Like the work that you have to do, it's the same. And it doesn't give you an advantage. I always laugh about the fact that, if you're a band, you could just go out and play all your hits. And at some point, if you can't write any new hits, people don't even care. And you just go out and play your 10 good songs and your MC Hammer, and you just play for the rest of your life.
It's a crazy phenomenon, right?
But with us, like if you're a comedian, you're supposed to throw out your act after every special and write a new one. And if you have a movie, you're supposed to make a new one. You can't do greatest hits anymore.
Right.
And so you're always terrified that you've lost your edge, that you're not funny anymore.
You're not connecting.
And that makes you work your ass off.
You're right. It's like a musician that says, do I have another song in the tank somewhere?
Yeah, you never know. If you're like, REO Speedwagon and your last hit was, a while ago. And so but I think that's fun too, because you can't get lazy. And that's why I think me and Sandler, got excited to do stand-up again, because it forces you to be connected to the audience, to be current, and to just not sit in your house. It keeps it fresh, because if it's not working, it gets quiet. it gets quiet.
Is there a concept or I guess a storyline in one of your movies that was the one that you always had a vision of making? Because I'm sure some of them came to you as you went along. Was there one when you were a young guy like, I got to make a movie about a guy that does this or a woman that does this?
Well, one thing that we're doing now, we have a TV show on HBO called Crashing, and it stars Pete Holmes as this religious guy who becomes a comedian in New York. And we have a new season coming up in January. Amy Schumer is in an episode, and John Mulaney, and it's a lot of it takes place at the Comedy Cellar in New York. But I like that storyline because it does show you the journey from being terrible and first starting, and what the steps are to try to enter that world, to try to get accepted by those people.
Right.
Because until you're funny, comedians don't want to talk to you. So that's the other side of it. Like, you're not even allowed to like hang out until people respect you.
When he was here, he spoke highly of you.
Oh, yeah, of course.
He talked about how like he was amazed that he got a meeting with you, and then very quickly it sort of moved along.
Well, Pete and I did a podcast. I was asked by his manager, who's a friend of mine, to do his podcast, and I had never heard of him because I hadn't been following comedy at that time. It was before I did stand-up again. And I went into this podcast in Austin in front of a crowd, and the other guests were Chris Gethard and Kumail Nanjiani. And
Nanjiani.
Yeah, the Italian guy.
and I didn't know any of them because I just wasn't in the stand-up world at all, and I wasn't paying attention to any of it. And what's weird is now, 7 years later, I have a TV series with Pete. We did The Big Sick, with Kumail. And Chris Gethard, I produced his HBO special, Career Suicide. So it was like the most productive podcast of all time.
I was gonna say.
That's incredible.
What about Amy Schumer? The story goes you heard her on Stern, and took a liking to her story and everything.
Well, what was weird looking back was I'm pretty sure I had never seen her do anything before that. I don't think I had seen her stand up.
Right.
Or I don't remember, but she was talking about relationships and telling funny dating nightmare stories, but also talking a lot about her dad who has MS, and she was so darkly funny but also very loving about it that I thought, I've never heard anyone talk about this issue of caring for someone who's struggling with something like that. And it felt like a movie. I just thought, this sounds like a movie. And I had her come in, and we worked on another movie for a while. And then one day,
what's the approach though? Tracking her down? You just have your person get in touch, and
I said, I just said I wanted to meet her. And then one day we were on the phone, and I just said, maybe you should do something more personal. Why do you think you're having trouble in your relationships? What do you think's going wrong? Like, when they crash and burn, why did they crash and burn? And she started talking about it, and we thought,
like,
I think that's the movie.
I love Trainwreck. I remember coming back saying it was fantastic. I'm a fan of Amy Schumer. I love the movie. Two things that I noticed in that movie: LeBron James. I was impressed with his acting. I thought for sometimes athletes fall flat. I thought he was actually. I was like, yo, LeBron's got some chops.
It's shocking. It's shocking how funny he was, because he hosted Saturday Night Live, and he was really funny. And Bill Hader was like, LeBron's got some moves. He's funny. So we go out to lunch with him one day to pitch him the idea.
Is that still weird to you? You're having lunch with LeBron James?
Well, that's the main thing. That's the main area I'm uncomfortable in. I'm not comfortable with athletes because I'm such a nerd. I always pick last in gym class. So I feel like whenever any athlete looks at me, they're just like, look at this peon.
He couldn't even reach the home plate.
Yeah, I don't know enough about any of the games.
Yo,
like,
what's up, twerp? You're like, what?
So even though they are nice, I have the insecurity of like a weird kid who can't like throw the ball well. And so we sit with him at lunch. And we, and it's scary, because it's LeBron. And they had a game the night before, and he's exhausted. It was interesting to see how tired he was. And then all the other guys on the team were in the same hotel, and they would pop by during the lunch and say hello. And they all looked wiped out. And I thought that was fascinating. Like, you never think about the next day, what it took out of them. And then we started pitching him the basic idea, which is, in all these movies, like When Harry Met Sally, there's like a buddy. And it's always like Bruno Kirby, or Carrie Fisher or something. And we're like, what if the buddy, for no reason, is you? But you're LeBron James, but he doesn't treat you like LeBron James. He just treats you like his buddy. Yeah. And you hang out.
Bruno Kirby. That's so funny.
And then, and like maybe you're like really like cheap with your money. And you just pitch like stuff that's not what you're like. And he thought it was so funny. He just got the joke of it. And then when we showed up on the first day, take one, he was hysterical.
And I love how you incorporated, as our producer Spot loves to say, when New York is a character in a movie, essentially.
Yeah, great backdrop.
Just, I love how you threw the Mets in there, the Knicks in there.
Yes.
Do you get a kick out of that? Do you need rights for that, by the way? If you're like, hey, I want to,
yeah.
is that a pain in the ass, or
It
are people
is.
usually cooperative?
No, I mean, I had to call, the head of the NBA and talk about the movie, and people wanted to be appropriate. I've never done a movie with the NFL. I think it's very difficult to get the NFL to do a movie where you can goof on them a little bit because they seem to have problems, more problems than other sports.
Yes.
We worked with NASCAR on Talladega Nights, and we were in a very deep conversation for a long time.
So much involved
about it, and we were able to work through all the jokes with them, and they turned out to be great. But it's real work because they're all very touchy that you're showing their sport in a good light.
And I'm also thinking just how gratifying it must be for these ideas that you have and come up with to come out and you be so proud of them, everybody liking them and everything.
Yeah.
So there's so much involved. Now you got this digital download coming
let's
out
talk about
tomorrow.
this, the
the
Zen
Zen Diaries
Diaries
of Garry Shandling.
Yeah,
tomorrow, right? Yeah.
It's I guess it's going to be out the 30th.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
tomorrow.
Is that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's almost Halloween.
Yeah. Halloween's Wednesday.
So, we did this documentary about Garry. It's a two-parter, kind of like, the Bob Dylan documentary or the Eagles documentary. And we just thought, if the Eagles are worth 2 parts, we're worth 2 parts.
Yeah.
And Garry, he was my mentor. He gave me my first job. My first job was writing the Grammys. So I wrote jokes for him for the Grammys, and then he hired me to write for the Larry Sanders Show, and then he asked me to direct it. And I never directed. He just walked into my office one day and went, "You're doing the next one." And
He believed in you.
He saw something in me and a lot of other people. And, he was a bit of a tortured guy at times, and he had a lot of trauma in his childhood. And he really tried to turn it into pleasure for other people. Like his pain, he turned into creativity. And it's kind of an amazing story, his life. It's very inspirational as well. And so you can, if you don't have HBO and you didn't see it there, you'll be able to download it on iTunes and other platforms.
And you talked to everyone that he touched along the way, like Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey's amazing in the documentary.
John Favreau, Jay Leno, all these people for Garry Shandling. It's pretty awesome.
By the way, I know you got to get out of here. Before you go, though, I was just thinking, you said it's tomorrow's October 30th. Wednesday's Halloween.
Yeah.
Mind blasting to you when you see people as characters you created on Halloween.
Well,
your movies inspire a lot of Halloween costumes.
That is true, yeah.
The ones I see the most lately is very small children dressed as the Pineapple Express characters.
That's great.
For some reason, people like to dress their 8-year-olds as pot dealers.
Well, Judd, I appreciate you being here. Guys, checking out the Zen Diaries of Garry Shandling, and you're always welcome back here on the show. We
Thank
appreciate
you very
it.
much.
Perfect. More Covino and Rich coming up.